get emotional. This is as tied to who I am as me breathing. Who I am today. I'm 43 years old. I am the mother of 4 boys who drive me nuts on a daily basis. I have a beautiful grandson who I tell everybody entered my world about 17 months ago and was a total surprise. Not only did I not know he was coming, but neither did Mom. So he hit us with the boom and he rules my world these days. I am a business owner. I am an activist. I own my own laser tattoo removal business, and we are going out from there and doing some other aesthetics and things like that. Little did I know in my life that my business and my personal world were going to cross and were going to become so important in the fight. And I call it a fight because I tell everybody I get up every morning and I'm ready to wage war because of what's taking place every day in our country. Not too long ago, I was interviewed by Al Jazeera, and it was kind of a big deal. I've had a lot of things going on, and it was interesting that as of last year, I was broadcast in every nation in the world. StoryCorps came and did a story, and I got to tell my story and have it put into the Library of Congress. So that means that people now, today, tomorrow, and our future will be able to go look at my name and look up a reference number and hear this story. And at first I was very excited about that, and I thought, wow, I'm going down in history. You know, you can go there and you can listen to me speak. And then it hit me that as it was such a blessing, I was so upset that domestic violence has to be a part of our history and our culture, that it's a part that people will be able to go hear and know that this is a part of American lives and lives around the world. So I tell everybody my goal is to make it back into the Library of Congress as one of the most influential advocates to end it. That being said, when Al Jazeera came to interview me, they said, we want to interview you. Because we've done stories all around the world, and we hear about all these victims being tortured in other countries, primarily women. You know, they're being brutalized, they're being victimized, and we heard your story, and it's the first time that we've really focused at home that this is taking place. And I was really shocked by that, because we hear all these stories, we hear them coming in from around the country, as if these types of things only happen in third world nations, and that's not the truth. It's happening here, in our homes. Things that we don't even know about are taking place. And so I found that upsetting. This is something that's taking place as we speak, right now, and I live with that every day. I know that while I'm free and I got to live, I know someone else is dying today. And that's hard. That's a hard thing to carry around. When I go and do public speakings, I have a hard time when they introduce me and they say survivor. Don Maestas, survivor. No. Don Maestas, surviving. Because once you experience this level of torture and abuse, you will not completely free yourself from it. It is something that you will live with every day of your life, and you will try to just live life. Like I tell everybody, you know, we see the movies and somehow they're free from it, and all of a sudden the rainbows come out and the birds are chirping and life is good. It's hard. You deal with long-term effects that take place in your life. So like I tell everybody, you can look at me today, and there's times where people say, oh, you look like somebody I don't want to mess with. And that's very hard for me to take, but I realize that I start to carry my shoulders back, that these days I carry myself in a different manner. But I tell everybody, every time I take a step, here's what I do know about myself. I know that this eye sits smaller than the other because of the blows that I took to this eye. I know that I have a permanent fracture that sits from my tooth to my nose that can never be fixed. I know that I've been punched in the nose so many times that my nose doesn't even bleed anymore. I know that my jaw sits crooked because it's been dislocated so many times. I know that my fingers sit crooked from the times that they were broken. I know that my ribs have been broken. I know that I took so many head injuries that I suffer from focal point grand mal seizures. That's who I am. I carry these things with me every day because of the life that I came from. Now, when I tell you about my life, you have to understand, and you're going to ask the questions, why? How? How come? How did you get into it? Because those are the questions that if I didn't live it, I'd be asking the same questions. It's one of the questions that I fight hardest to change. Because I was a victim of domestic violence for 28 years of my life. I'm 43 now. Think about that. 28 years of my life involved in violence. And 4 relationships. And you have to think, if you made it through one, why would you possibly go to the second one and back off the third and the fourth? And if I didn't understand it, I would think the same thing. I would think exactly the same thing. And we do that to victims. We ask them, well, does she like it? Well, why would she stay? We've all asked those questions. And so I'm going to tell you a brief history of my story and the things that I went through so you can start to understand the dynamics of how this takes place. So like I tell everybody, when I was born, I was an only child, and my father was extremely mentally abusive. Never really physical, but mentally. The first mistake I made with my father was that I was a girl. I was firstborn on each side of the family, and I was intended to be a boy, and I wasn't, and that was the first thing I did wrong. And I paid for it every day. My dad would do things to let me know that he could not love me. He would do things like my cousins would be over, and he would sit me on the couch and tell me, well, it's time for me to play with them, even though he never spent time with me, and would make me watch him play with the other kids, having a good time, and I was not allowed to participate. Anything that I did, he would break down. Any chance that he got. I learned at an extremely young age not to ever let him know when something that I cared about was important to me, because I promise you that if I let him know, it would be gone. He would do this repeatedly to me. And I can share one story that's pretty graphic. When I was, I think I was about 9 years old, 10 years old, I was in 4th grade. And we had moved to Texas, and we were living in this extremely tiny town. It's one of those towns where if you blinked, you would pass it. And so I was an only child, and I was by myself, and all the kids in this area were from farming communities. So everybody was in FFA. So I went home and I was like, I want to be in FFA, get me an animal. And so my dad brought home a goat. And this goat was not just a goat, this was my best friend in the whole world. We played every day, I brushed him, we had a good time. And so one day I got off the bus, and I came into the house, and they had castrated the goat, and I didn't understand this. And so I was extremely upset. You had hurt my best friend. What are you doing? And I threw a fit. That was the mistake I made. I threw a fit in front of my father's friend. I was so upset and so hurt, and my dad was so angry because I embarrassed him in front of his friend. So about 2 weeks later, I'm spending the night at my friend's house, and my mom calls and says, you need to come home. You gotta clean your room, we've got some things to do, we have friends coming over. So when I get home, she says, your dad needs you out back. So I go, and there's my best friend, shrunk up. And my dad tells me that my job is that I have to hold the bucket while he slits his throat. And I did. And my dad told me that this would not have happened if I wouldn't have been such a crybaby. And these were the types of events that just took place, one right after another. So at a very young age, I realized that I was alone. That I was truly alone. And I had this mindset that was put into my mind that I was unlovable. My own father couldn't love me. There was really something wrong with me because I could see him loving others. My father was like a pillar in the church and in the community. Everybody loved my father. And so if everybody could love him and he was so good to them, then obviously it had to be me. And so eventually I end up on my own. Both of my parents leave, and I'm being raised by my grandmother. And I'm about 13, 14 years old, and I'm out there on my own. nobody really has any accountability of where I am or what's taking place. So I'm starved for affection. Like I tell people, when you're starved for affection, any affection is better than no affection. And I found somebody who was more than willing to pay attention to me. And at 14, I'm getting involved in a relationship. And this guy, his family, you know, they're known in the town. He seems very protective over me, and it starts slowly. And it starts with, you know, you really don't need to wear makeup. I actually like you better without makeup. You're so much prettier without it. I don't like when you dress like that. Do you see how your friends dress? They'll dress like whores. You don't want to dress like them. You're better than that. Why do you hang out with them? They try to talk you into doing things where they're going to get you in trouble, and I'm looking out for you, and you really need to watch the friends that you're hanging out with. And in my mind at that age, I'm thinking, wow, he really cares about me. He cares what I look like, how people perceive me. But little did I know that he was starting to cut me off to the world. And I tell everybody, you could see, because before I met him, my hair was done, my makeup was done, my nails were done, my clothes matched. I was, you know, everywhere I went. And then you slowly saw the progression of while he was taking control of it. From now on, my hair was up. I wasn't really wearing makeup. I was starting to wear sweats and clothes that would more hide my body versus showing my body. Anything that I could do, because he cared about me so much. This is at least what I could do for him. And I remember the first time he hit me. The first time I ever got hit was at the mall. Because you have to remember, I'm 14, 15 years old. And he hits me at the mall, and I'm angry. Oh, I'm furious. How could he hit me? I cannot believe he hit me. And then what did I do? What did I do to deserve to make him hit me? Is what we all do. When I should have just been asking from the get-go, why would he hit me? And from there, it started to spiral. It got worse and worse. And you have to remember that my family's not around at this time. I've really been pulled away from all my friends, and as that's happening, the violence is increasing. And he was tough. Let me tell you, like I tell everybody, those were the grounds. Those are where I was broken and built up again. He would do things like in my sleep poke me and randomly say guys' names. And if I flinched one, I would be up against the wall with a knife to my throat. Who is this? Who is this? You moaned when I said his name. Accusing me of being with this person that I never even heard of. I never even knew who this person was. Anything that he could do to control me and to put me on edge. I was sleep deprived. I was kept on edge all the time. I was in survival mode. There was no thinking about other things. It was just in the moment of where I was. And he made me believe that no one was there to help him. He used to tell me that if he killed me, my parents would probably call and thank him because no one wanted me. He used to tell me that the fact that I was sexually abused when I was a child was not their fault, it was mine because I projected what a whore I was. And these things are all starting to feed into my brain. And so now I'm into my second relationship, and this guy can't love me. So it must be me. My dad was right. There's something wrong with me. And this went on from about 14 to when I was 17, I got pregnant with my son. And I tell everybody, I definitely had him on purpose. I absolutely got pregnant on purpose. I knew I was young, I knew my situation, but I was so alone in this world that I just wanted something that was mine. Something that was going to love me unconditionally, because this person was going to come for me, so God, he had to love me. Somebody had to. And I remember the day that I was in the hospital. I was in there, my mom was in there, my grandmother was in there, and it actually kind of brought the family together. And I remember he walked in and he walked past all of them, and he walked straight up to my ear. And you have this vision that, I've had your child. This shows you how much I love you. We're going to make this right. We're going to be together. We're going to be a family, because that's all I ever wanted. In this messed up world that I'm in. That's all I wanted. And I remember he walked in, he leaned into my ear right in front of my mom and them, and he said, this would be the happiest day of my life, but you lived. remember thinking, wow, no one can help me. Look at him, he just walked right past everyone and just said it right there, and everything came crashing down. But I will say that my son was the beginning of the end, because now I had someone to fight for, someone that I wasn't going to let go through the things that I had gone through. And that's probably one of the things that saved me and my children's life, is that even though it took me a while, my goal was to always give them a better life. And so in the process, I got pregnant again. But at this point, I'm really separating myself. And you have to remember that I'm barely 18 years old. Kids that age are just starting to go from high school thinking about where they want to go to college. And so here's what took place. Me being young, me not having that parental structure, me watching TV and growing up and letting TV raise me, I was already separating from him, and I went up to his mother's house, and I'll never forget, I was sitting on the couch with my youngest son, and I was feeding him, and you couldn't see me because the couch was big and I was really tiny. And I hear his brothers and his uncles come in, and I hear them talking about a double murder that they committed. So this family that I was involved in was the greatest family, let me tell you. And this was a murder that I had been watching on the news for about the last week. They had no clues. They weren't sure what had happened, what had taken place, but it was a brutal murder. 2 very young kids lost their lives. And so in my mind, watching TV, I'm like, here's my chance to escape. Now I know what I gotta do. I'm gonna go to the police. I'm gonna tell them what I know. They're gonna take me and my kids. They're gonna arrest them all. They're gonna put us in witness protection. And finally, I'm gonna get to be mom. And I'm gonna be away from him, finally. He won't get to me this time. And that's exactly what I did. I went to the police department, and they knew to take me very seriously, very quickly. Because the evidence, the things that I was telling them were things that they had not released to the public. And they made the arrests. And the minute that they made the arrest, I was like, yes, this is the start of it. And then the phone call came. And one of the officers who had had a problem with my ex's family for a long time thought that it would be really great that once they made the arrest that they handed my type statement to them when they made the arrest. And there was everything that I had done. I had betrayed them beyond belief. And the death threats just started coming immediately. And believe me, it was a threat to take seriously. And so I had to flee. No help from the police, no help from anyone. I had to figure out how to get myself and my kids to safety. So we came to Albuquerque. We were here for a short time. And my father amazingly reaches out and says, you know what? Why don't you come here? You can go to college, we'll help you with the kids. And I thought, wow, I get, and out of all that, I heard all those things and those were great, but I heard, you finally care about me. We're gonna have a relationship, which is something that I had chased that man for years and years. Because if I could just make him love me, then everything else I could fit into place and I could make it right. And so we get there, and to make a long story short, here's what it was. My father and his wife, his new wife, had been trying to have children, and they couldn't. They didn't think she could at the time. And so they had discussed adoption, and so my father thought, since I had 2 boys, and they were at least of his bloodline, why not take mine? And so I was offered a nice amount of money to give my children up, and when I refused, it was a knockdown, blowout fight. He said they were going to have me arrested, they were going to tell the court that I wasn't able to take care of my children, they were going to take them one way or another. And I stood up to my father for the first time. That's the first time in all that time that I ever stood up to this man, and I told him what I thought. And we got into a fist fight, and me and my children had to leave. We slept in our car for a little bit, and then we got home, but guess what? Where are we going to go? We ended up right back where all this had taken place. And so I tell everybody, for about a year or so, I lived in hiding. Nobody even knew that I was in town. I lived in my grandmother's basement. We slept during the day, and I stayed awake all night. And the reason that I slept in the day is because my grandparents would be up, and I knew that if I heard something coming through the door, that would give me enough time to get up and react. I had knives hidden everywhere in my house. I was ready for someone to come through that door. I tell everybody, I think about it now, and it's insane to think that in my children's room, you know those nets where you fill them with stuffed animals? There was a knife sticking right in the middle of them that nobody could see. So that if I had to, I could pull that knife within seconds and fight to the death. It caused so much anxiety that I almost became agoraphobic. I almost could not leave my home without having a full-on panic attack. And eventually I had to teach myself how to walk outside, how to go to the store and buy at least one item without thinking that I was gonna faint. And eventually I got us moving and I got things going, and that's when we came to Albuquerque. And right away, you have to understand that I'm barely 20 years old now, 21. When everybody else is going to the bar and thinking, oh, I'm turned 21, let's go do this. I'm just thinking, what do I gotta do to protect myself and my children? And so I tell everybody, there was a guy that came from the same hometown that I did, and they used to fight with my ex's family. And he ended up being very nice to me in the beginning, and so in my mind I'm thinking, okay, all right, this guy, because at least him and his friends can protect me from my ex and his family. So I picked a bigger monster to protect me from the monster before. And I paid for it. And I tell everybody that relationship was very short-lived, but extremely violent. And this was physical violence. He's actually the one who broke my fingers. And I tell everybody, he wasn't really around, but when he did show up, it was just an explosion. It was just violence. And we weren't really together, but guess what? Guess who's pregnant again? Yep, me. Yep. Contraception, things like that. Didn't really think about them. I was in the moment. Don't know what the hell I was thinking. But honestly, when I think back, I think that in each situation, we all do that, where we think that if we're with this person and we have a child, that somehow it changes it, and somehow we're going to make it right because it's for the better of the child, and somehow we're going to be good to each other. And that rarely happens. And so I tell everybody, I remember with him, what happened was, it was here in Albuquerque. I lived right there on Central and Coors, right behind the Sonic. And I remember I was 7 months pregnant, right around 7.5 months pregnant, and he had been making threats. And so I was smart enough to know to take the kids to my mom's house and keep them there where they'd be safe. And I was so scared, I asked my friend if she would just stay with me. And I didn't want to be at home because I knew what ass beatings were. I knew how to take a punch. And those were things that once you take a good one, believe me, you don't want one again. And so I was so scared that I didn't even stay in my house that night. We drove around in the car all night long until the sun came up. Because for me, you have to remember that nighttime is the most dangerous time for me. Because that's when the bar lets out. That's when the people you care about are drunk. That's when the violence escalates. That's where it begins. So nighttime is rough for me. And so daylight's coming and I'm starving. And so I tell her, let's go to the house real quick. I'll keep the engine running because I'm getting really smart at getting away. And I tell her, here's my keys, you go in, here's where my checkbook is, come out and we'll go eat. Because I made it through the night. Every time daylight would come, I knew that I had made it through another night. And so she went in, and mind you, I had an apartment with wrought iron on the doors and windows. She goes in, and I'm waiting, and she's not coming out, and I'm starting to get nervous, and all of a sudden, who comes to the door? There he is. And we all do this. Because victims, it's not that we ask for it, but you know what we're trying to do? We're trying to de-escalate it as fast as we can. Because we know where this is going and how ugly this can get. And at the same time, we're always thinking what our part is in this. How can we make it better? How can I make this better? And so very smart, I'm sitting in my car, and when I'm first talking to him, it's like through this. What do you want? What are you doing here? Leave. You just need to leave. And I'm like thinking I'm being really safe. And I'm telling him he needs to go. And so he starts. What are you doing? Where were you all night? You're pregnant with my baby. What makes you think that I'm going to hurt you? Why would I hit you? I'm not going to hit you now. You've got my baby and you're carrying my child. I'm tired of fighting with you. I just want to make this right. I don't understand why you can't make this right. I don't understand when I'm trying to be good to you, why you're fighting with me. Do you hear what's taking place there? The transition of blame has now been put on me, and then you start to think, well, maybe this is the time he's going to be nice to me. Maybe this is when everything's going to change. And on the outside of it, that's crazy. But when you're on the inside, you're hoping. You're always hoping. Victims are always hoping that this is the last time, that things are going to get better. And he tells me, I just want to talk to you. I just want to talk to you. I just want to make things right. He says, just scoot over. You don't even have to go in the house, because I'm thinking I'm in my driveway, that have neighbors. I think this might be okay. And so what do? I unlock the door. And he tells me, just scoot over to the other side. And I scoot over, and that's when the first blow comes. Right here. I felt that thing go through my body, from the top of my head to the bottom of my toes. And then the next one comes. And he takes me from my house to an empty parking lot right behind. And I tell everybody, I remember going up to that parking lot thinking, shit, this is where I'm going to die. Of all the, this is where they're going to find my body. Is in this empty dirt parking lot, thrown like a dead animal on the side of the road. And I'm wondering, how are they going to find me? Will he beat me so bad that they won't be able to recognize me? What kind of injuries will I have? Will they be able to save the baby? Because I'm about to die. Do you know what that feeling is, to know that you're actually making peace with your life because you know that you're probably not going to see the next hour? Your life has come down to minutes. And he repeatedly laid those blows in. And all I could do was sit in a ball and hold my stomach, thinking that at least he wouldn't get to the baby. Just don't kill my baby, please. And I'm starting to get dizzy, and I know once I go out and I'm unconscious, it's over. I can only imagine what's going to take place after that. Because he keeps hitting me so hard that my head keeps banging against the window. And then I start thinking, I cannot die here? Are you kidding me? I'm not dying here. And so I start to get very smart, and I start to tell him, you're going to be in so much trouble. I can't wait till you go to prison. And they're going to know it's you. Because guess what? I told my mom to call me every hour on the hour, and if I didn't answer, to call the police and tell them that you killed me. And he started to get very nervous. And then I start to tell him, I don't want you to go to prison. I love you. I'm carrying your baby. You think I would send my baby's dad to prison? You think I would do this to you? I wouldn't do this to you. Just take me to my mom's. If you take me to my mom's, I'll go get the kids, and we'll go to my house until I heal. Until nobody can tell the injuries that I've taken. And believe me, you, take it from me, I don't know why you believe this, because this eye was completely swollen shut. It was red. I had a black eye here, completely hemorrhaged. You couldn't even see the color of my skin from here all the way down this side of my body because of the bruising. And so he drove me to my mom's. Somehow I talked him into getting me to my mom's. And I tell everybody, I remember that drive because my mom lived on Tramway. I remember going on the freeway and thinking, every time an exit would pass, I would think, okay, cool, one more exit. We made it, one more exit. Because I knew if he pulled over on one of those exits, the beating was going to start again. And so I just counted my blessings every time we would pass an exit to my mom's. We pulled up to my mom's, and he hands me a pair of sunglasses to put on. And I walk in the house and I say, Mom, call the police. Call them right now. And I stand behind the door, and with every ounce of energy and gumption and whatever you want to call it, I stood there, took a deep breath, and I walked back outside. And I went up to his car window and I said, hey, my mom has the kids in the tub. Can you just sit here and wait? And I just got to help her get them dressed. And I walked back in that house and I locked all the doors and I slid down and just broke down. They arrested him. I went to the hospital, got sent home, and then I found out that he was bailed out of jail and that they had messed up on the charges and so they dropped him. So I tell everybody, now's the second time in my life when, and not at their fault, it's not a grudge or a chip on the shoulder, where really law enforcement has really put me down. So I'm really starting to get really untrustworthy of them. And so the best thing I could do with him was to make peace and try to separate myself from him, which is exactly what I did. I will say that after my son was born, he did make a second attempt on my son's life. And at that time I swore to him that if I ever got a chance to come back after him, I would. I would, because hurting me was different, but hurting my children was something else. And so at this point in time, I get into my third relationship, and this is the charmer. This is a real predator. This is a charmer that I remember the first day I met him, I was with a group of friends, and I thought I had finally left this lifestyle, but I couldn't leave that lifestyle because I hadn't figured out what kept leading me to those type of situations and how to fix myself so that I did not engage in those situations. And so a lot of times when I do talk with advocates, they all get uncomfortable when I say that. So let me be very clear when I say that I did not deserve the things that happened to me. I did not ask for the things that happened to me. But I had to look at myself because the reality was that these events could not take place without me being present. And I had to start to understand what my behavior and the things that had taken place in my life led me to those situations so that I could correct those to avoid those situations in the future. And so when I met him, the very first time I met him, he came up and he said, you know what, you don't know me, but I'm going to marry you. You know what that does to a girl when a guy walks up to you and says, you know what, I'm going to marry you. Me, damaged goods, are you serious? Me, who wasn't a virgin anymore, who had 3 kids in tow, I was damaged goods, nobody could love me, and you're going to walk up to me out of nowhere and say that you're going to marry me? Because probably if he marries me, it'll just make everything right. We think marriage just makes everything right, somehow. And he brought me roses, he brought me gifts, he did everything to just show me that he was just the most amazing man off the face of the earth. And I walked right past all the warning signs. I walked past all the things that were taking place. And I married him, and I tell everybody when I married him, there was something in the back of my mind that said, the hell are you thinking? And I was with him until age 24. So imagine that. I've gone through all this, gotten married, have 3 kids, and I'm barely going through this relationship up until the age of 24. I'm still a baby. And I married him. I have to say that he was really good to my children. That's one thing that I will give him. But little did I not pay attention to the drug use, to the things that were taking place. And I tell everybody with him is when I got married and I thought that that should fix it, and I thought that I was really smart in the person I picked because somebody who would bring me roses and shower me with gifts couldn't possibly do the violent things that he was capable of. And I tell everybody that when the reality hit that I had gotten myself in the same type of situation, I started to die inside. Because I just thought, oh, from my dad to here, it has to be me. Because the one factor in all these relationships is me. And so it has to be me. I'm unlovable. This is just the type of life, this is the type of person I deserve. I deserve no better. This is it. And I tell everybody that's when I really started to die. I really started to give up on my values, on life, on hope, on all these things, and you could see me dying. And that one was it was violent. He's actually the one that caused the head injuries to where I started suffering from focal point grand mal seizures. But I started to fight. When I got sick, a lot of events had taken place. There was a lot of violence in this time. My son with him was actually born at 7 months because little did I know that he was having other relationships outside of ours, and they jumped me for it. And I almost lost my son. And drugs and alcohol came into place, and I tell everybody, don't ever blame domestic violence on drugs and alcohol. Drugs and alcohol only intensify it. The violence is always there to begin with. It just intensifies it. And at this point, I'm sort of fighting with him, and like I tell everybody, at this point, I've just given up, and it's kind of like, you do this to me, I'll do this to you. You do this to me, and I've started to just really succumb to this life. And I tell everybody, the two things that happened were, at one point, I talk about this, because he was using drugs and alcohol, and I admit it. I will tell you the truth. At that point, I hated him so much, and I just hated life so much, that I just didn't care. I would do things just out of pure spite. I really did. I just hated my life at that point. I tell everybody, it was under so much control from him. I wasn't allowed to open the door when he wasn't there. I wasn't allowed to speak to his friends unless he said it was okay. I was not allowed to have my own phone. And you just don't exist as a person anymore. And I tell everybody, he went so far as to check the mileage to the store and back from our house. And he would check the mileage before I left, and he would check the mileage when we got back to make sure that I hadn't gone anywhere else, that I hadn't talked to anyone else. Also, every time I left that house and I went somewhere, I was instructed to go to the bathroom so that he could check my underwear. Do you know what that does to the human soul? It destroys you. It takes everything that you are and crushes it and just lays it in front of you. And so I tell everybody, at this time I started to die. And now he's using crack cocaine. He's high all the time. He's selling our stuff. I can't really talk to anybody about this. And I tell everybody, this was the time when I pushed it. Man, I pushed it. I used to do horrible things to him when he'd show up at the house high. Anybody who's ever seen someone, or you see on TV how crack addicts are, I used to do the horrible things. When he would be in the bathroom getting high,